The cold vacuum of space stretched endlessly in all directions as 6 sleek alien ships moved silently toward the third planet from a yellow star. Scout Commander Vexhai stood on the bridge of his lead vessel, watching the blue and green world grow larger on his screens. His 4 eyes focused on the data flowing across his displays, while his scaled hands worked the controls with practiced ease. "Commander, we are detecting radio signals from the planet," reported his communications officer. "The transmissions are very basic, mostly entertainment broadcasts and simple data transfers." Vexhai nodded slowly. After 40 years of service in the Zeridian Empire's expansion fleet, he had seen this pattern many times before. A primitive world discovers radio technology, begins broadcasting into space, and eventually draws the attention of more advanced civilizations. The process was always the same. "Any signs of organized military activity?" he asked. "Very little, sir. We detect some radar installations and what appear to be aircraft, but nothing that suggests a unified planetary defense system. The inhabitants seem to be divided into many small groups scattered across the landmasses." This was even better than Vexhai had hoped. Divided primitive cultures were easier to handle than unified ones. His previous conquest had involved a world, with nearly 2 million inhabitants spread across 3 continents. And even that had required careful planning. This world looked like it might have similar numbers but without any central command structure. "Estimate their total population," Vexhai ordered. His science officer worked at her station for several minutes. "Difficult to determine exactly. Commander, their cities appear larger than expected for a primitive world. Initial estimates suggest perhaps 5 to 10 million inhabitants total." Vexhai was surprised. That was more than most worlds his empire had encountered. Still, even 10 million primitives with basic technology posed no real threat to his forces. The Zeridian Empire had conquered worlds with larger populations before. "Open a communication channel," he commanded. "Let us introduce ourselves to these creatures." Far below on the planet's surface, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the underground command center of the Earth Defense Network monitoring station. The facility was hidden deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, its existence known only to the highest levels of military command. Banks of computers and communication equipment lined the walls, while dozens of technicians monitored screens showing data from satellites, radar installations, and deep space sensors positioned throughout the solar system. "Sir, we have multiple contacts approaching from the outer system," reported Sergeant Lisa Park from her station. 6 vessels, unknown configuration, decelerating as they approach Earth orbit. Morrison had been expecting this day for years. The possibility of alien contact had been discussed in classified briefings since the 1950s, and Earth's military leadership had developed detailed protocols for such an encounter. He reached for the red phone that connected directly to the Pentagon. "This is Morrison at Deep Space Command. We have confirmed alien contact, 6 vessels approaching Earth, initiating Protocol 7. Within minutes, the call was transferred to Admiral Lisa Carter at the United Earth Military Command headquarters. Morrison had worked with Carter for over a decade, and he knew she would handle this situation with the careful precision that had made her one of the most respected military leaders on Earth. "Jake, what's the status of our visitors?" Carter asked. "They appear to be slowing down, ma'am. No aggressive actions detected. Long-range sensors suggest they're conducting scanning operations of Earth and the surrounding space." "Good. Maintain. Passive monitoring for now. If they attempt to communicate, refer them to me directly. And Jake, make sure our response protocols are ready. We need to be careful about how we present ourselves." Morrison understood completely. Earth's military leadership had long debated how to handle first contact with alien civilizations. The hour's consensus was to appear strong enough to discourage aggression, while avoiding actions that might be interpreted as threats. It was a delicate balance that required careful planning. Hours passed as the alien ships continued their approach. Morrison's team tracked their movements while intercepting and analyzing their communications. The aliens were using sophisticated technology, but not beyond Earth's ability to understand. Their scanning beams were thorough but not particularly advanced compared to Earth's own deep space sensors. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," announced his communications officer. "It's being broadcast on multiple frequencies in what appears to be mathematical sequences." Morrison nodded. This was expected. Most theoretical models for alien contact assumed they would begin with mathematical concepts as a universal language. Put it through to analysis and prepare our standard response. The message was simple once decoded. The aliens identified themselves as representatives of the Zeridian Empire and requested information about Earth's military capabilities. They explained that they were conducting a standard assessment to determine whether Earth posed any threat to their expanding territory. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. These were not peaceful explorers or scientific researchers. They were military scouts evaluating Earth as a potential target for conquest. He immediately contacted Admiral Carter with the news. "They want to know about our military strength," he reported. "This appears to be a standard reconnaissance mission to assess whether we're worth conquering." Carter was quiet for a moment. "Interesting. They're being very direct about their intentions. That suggests they're confident in their ability to handle any resistance we might offer." "What are your orders, ma'am?" "Respond to their request, but be conservative with the information. Give them basic facts about our defensive capabilities without revealing the full scope of our military structure. Let them think we're a typical primitive world with limited forces." Morrison understood the strategy. Earth's military leadership had studied the history of contact between advanced and primitive civilizations on their own planet. The pattern was always the same. The advanced civilization would assess the primitive one's ability to resist, then decide whether conquest was worth the effort. By appearing weak, Earth might avoid conflict entirely. Prepare a response indicating that Earth maintains defensive forces, but is primarily focused on peaceful activities, Carter continued. Mention that we have some aircraft and naval vessels, but don't specify numbers or capabilities. Make it sound like we're a minor threat at best. Morrison worked with his team to craft the response. The message explained that Earth was inhabited by several billion people organized into multiple nations, each maintaining modest military forces for defensive purposes. It mentioned that Earth had basic aircraft, naval vessels, and ground forces, but emphasized that these were primarily used for peacekeeping and disaster response, rather than aggressive military action. The response was transmitted to the alien fleet, and Morrison's team waited for their reaction. The aliens replied quickly, expressing surprise at Earth's population size but seeming reassured by the description of limited military capabilities. "They're requesting a formal meeting," Morrison reported to Carter. "They want to discuss terms for either peaceful coexistence or Earth's integration into their empire." Carter smiled grimly. "Perfect. That gives us time to prepare properly. Tell them we'll need time to coordinate with our various military leaders and that we'll arrange a meeting at one of our military installations." Morrison composed the response, while Carter began making calls to military commanders around the world. The aliens had made one critical error in their assessment. They assumed that Earth's military forces were as limited as their population estimates suggested. They had no idea that Earth's 8 billion inhabitants supported military forces numbering in the tens of millions, with equipment and training that would shock even an advanced alien civilization. "Set up the meeting for Edwards Air Force Base," Carter ordered, "and make sure our people understand the game plan. We're going to show these aliens exactly what they're dealing with, one small piece at a time." As the alien fleet settled into high orbit around Earth, both sides prepared for their first face-to-face encounter. The aliens expected to meet with a primitive world's limited military leadership and negotiate the terms of an easy conquest. The humans prepared to demonstrate that Earth was not the helpless target the aliens believed it to be. The stage was set for a revelation that would change both civilizations forever. 3 days after first contact, General Rick Stone stood on the observation deck of Edwards Air Force Base, watching the alien shuttle descend through the clear California sky. The craft was unlike anything he had seen before, moving without visible engines or exhaust trails. Its smooth metallic surface reflected the desert sun as it approached the designated landing area. Stone had commanded military operations on 4 continents during his 30-year career, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Behind him, Colonel Amy Davis adjusted her uniform and checked her communication device one final time. She would serve as the primary liaison with the alien delegation during their stay on Earth. "Remember, We want them to feel welcome, but not overwhelmed, Stone said quietly. Let them think this is one of our larger installations without making it obvious that we have many others. Davis nodded. Edwards was actually considered a medium-sized base within the United States Air Force, housing about 12,000 active-duty personnel and covering over 300 square miles of desert. For the aliens who expected to find small tribal armies, even this single installation would be impressive. The alien shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, its landing gear extending smoothly from hidden compartments. After several minutes, a section of the hull dissolved away to reveal an opening. 4 figures emerged, walking with the careful movements of beings experiencing Earth's gravity for the first time. Scout Commander HFY was the first to step onto human soil. His tall frame was covered in fine scales that shifted color slightly in the sunlight, and his 4 eyes moved independently as he scanned the base around him. 3 other aliens followed him, each carrying different types of scanning equipment. Colonel Davis approached with a small honor guard of 12 soldiers. The humans moved with precise military bearing, their uniforms crisp and their weapons held at perfect attention. HFY noticed immediately that these soldiers seemed far more disciplined than he had expected from a primitive world. "Welcome to Earth," Davis said, her words translated by the universal communication devices both sides had agreed to use. "I am Colonel Amy Davis of the United States Air Force. General Stone has asked me to serve as your guide during your visit." HFY studied the humans carefully. Their equipment appeared more advanced than his initial scans had suggested, and the base itself was much larger than expected. In the distance, he could see dozens of aircraft parked in neat rows, while groups of soldiers moved through training, exercises on nearby fields. "We appreciate your hospitality," HFY replied. "We had estimated that your world might have military forces numbering in the thousands. This installation alone appears to house that many soldiers." Davis smiled politely. "Edwards is actually one of our smaller facilities. We use it primarily for testing new aircraft and training programs. Most of our major installations are located elsewhere." The alien commander felt his first moment of unease. If this was a small facility, how large were their major ones? His intelligence reports had suggested that Earth's total military might number in the tens of thousands at most. The casual way this human officer spoke suggested those estimates might be wrong. "Perhaps you could show us your training facilities," requested one of HFY's subordinates. "We would like to understand how your military forces are prepared for combat." "Of course," Davis replied. "Major Ben Clark will give you a full tour of our training grounds." Major Clark appeared with military precision, saluting smartly before addressing the alien delegation. He was a veteran of multiple combat deployments and had been carefully selected for this assignment. His job was to demonstrate human military capability without revealing the full scope of Earth's defenses. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you how we prepare our airmen for combat operations," Clark said, leading the group toward a series of large buildings. As they walked, HFY noticed hundreds of humans engaged in various military activities. Some were running in formation while calling out cadences. Others were practicing combat maneuvers with weapons that looked far more sophisticated than expected. The level of organization and discipline was impressive for what he had assumed would be a primitive military force. "How many soldiers are stationed at this base?" HFY asked. "Edwards currently houses about 12,000 active-duty personnel," Clark replied casually. "That includes air crew, maintenance teams, security forces, and administrative staff. We also have several thousand civilian contractors who support our operations." HFY stopped walking. 12,000 soldiers at a single installation? That was more than his entire scouting fleet carried. His worst-case estimates for Earth's total military had been around 50,000 soldiers spread across the entire planet. 12,000, he repeated slowly. "And you said this was one of your smaller installations?" "That's correct," Clark confirmed. "Our really large bases can house 50,000 or more. Edwards is mainly used for aircraft testing and specialized training programs." The aliens exchanged glances. Their intelligence gathering had been focused on detecting large military formations and weapons systems. They had not considered that humans might maintain numerous smaller installations scattered across the planet. Clark led them to a training field where several hundred soldiers were conducting combat exercises. The humans moved with coordinated precision, using tactics that showed advanced military thinking. Their weapons fired with accuracy that surprised the alien observers, and their communication systems allowed perfect coordination between units. "These soldiers appear very well trained," observed Vexhai. "They should be. Most of our personnel go through at least 6 months of basic training, followed by specialized instruction in their chosen fields. Many have college degrees or advanced technical training before they even join the military." The alien commander realized he was looking at a professional military force, not the militia groups he had expected to find. These humans had invested serious resources in military training and equipment. The implications were disturbing. As they continued the tour, Clark mentioned coordination with other military branches. "We work closely with the Army, Navy, and Marines," he said. "This exercise next week will involve personnel from all 4 services." "4 services?" Vexahai asked. "Army handles ground operations, Navy manages sea and underwater missions, air, Force controls aerial operations, and Marines specialize in rapid deployment and amphibious assault. Each service has its own training facilities, equipment, and personnel." The aliens were beginning to understand that Earth's military was far more complex than they had imagined. Not only did the humans have more soldiers than expected, but they had organized them into specialized forces with different capabilities. Captain Helen Turner joined the group as they entered a communications center. Banks of computers and screens filled the room while dozens of technicians monitored information from around the world. "Captain Turner coordinates logistics for our training exercises," Clark explained. "She's responsible for making sure all our personnel have the equipment and supplies they need." Turner smiled at the aliens. "It's quite a challenge sometimes. Last month's joint exercise involved coordinating supplies for 15,000 personnel from 3 different services. We had to work with supply chains from 17 different military installations just to get everything in place on time." Vexhai felt his confidence shaking. 15,000 soldiers in a single exercise? Supply chains involving 17 installations? How many military bases did this planet have? "Captain Turner," he said carefully, "when you mention 17 installations, are these all located in your country?" "Oh no," Turner replied. "About half were U.S. bases, but we also coordinated with allied installations in Japan, Germany, and Australia. When we do large-scale exercises, we often work with military forces from other nations." The alien commander realized that Earth's military was not just larger than expected, but it was also international in scope. Multiple human nations were coordinating military operations on a scale that dwarfed anything his empire had encountered. As the day ended, Vexhai returned to his shuttle with his mind racing. This single installation housed more trained soldiers than most worlds in the Zeridian Empire. The humans casually mentioned working with other military services, other nations, and other installations, as if such coordination was routine. That night, as he transmitted his initial report to the fleet, in orbit Vexhai began to suspect that Earth was not the primitive target they had expected to find. 2 weeks had passed since the aliens arrived at Edwards Air Force Base, and Scout Commander Vexhai was becoming more worried each day. What he had expected to be a simple assessment of a primitive world's military capabilities had turned into a disturbing revelation about human warfare potential. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in her office at the Pentagon, reviewing reports from Colonel Davis about the alien delegation's activities. The aliens had been asking increasingly detailed questions about Earth's military structure, and their growing nervousness was obvious to their human hosts. "They want to see more of our military operations," Carter told General Stone during their morning briefing. "I think it's time to show them what a real joint exercise looks like." Stone nodded. "The Pacific Fleet is conducting training maneuvers with Japanese and Australian forces next week. That might give our visitors a better understanding of how we operate." Carter smiled. The aliens still had no idea that they were dealing with mid-level officers who managed routine operations. They had not yet met anyone from the highest levels of Earth's military command structure. At Edwards, Colonel Tony Miller had been assigned as the new liaison officer for the extended alien visit. Miller had experience with international military cooperation and spoke several languages fluently. His job was to help the aliens understand how Earth's various military forces work together. "Commander Vexhai," Miller said as he entered the alien quarters, "Admiral Carter has approved your request to observe larger military operations. We've arranged for you to witness a joint training exercise involving multiple nations." Vexhai looked up from the human military manuals he had been studying. The books contained information about tactics, organization, and equipment that far exceeded what his intelligence reports had suggested possible for a primitive world. "How large will this exercise be?" he asked. "Moderate size," Miller replied, casually. "About 40,000 personnel from 6 different countries, 3 naval fleets, 2 air wings, and several ground divisions will participate." The alien commander nearly dropped the manual he was holding. 40,000 soldiers in a single training exercise. His entire invasion fleet carried fewer than 30,000 troops total, and that was considered a major military operation by Zeridian standards. 40,000, he repeated slowly. "And you consider this moderate?" Miller shrugged. "It's larger than our usual training exercises, but smaller than what we'd mobilize for a real conflict. We try to keep our peacetime training manageable." Vexhai felt his scales shift color with anxiety. If 40,000 soldiers was considered manageable for training, what would humans mobilize for actual warfare? 3 days later, the alien delegation found themselves aboard a human naval vessel in the Pacific Ocean. The USS Montana was a massive aircraft carrier that served as the command center for the joint exercise. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been transferred from his deep space monitoring duties, served as their guide aboard the ship. "Welcome aboard the Montana," Morrison said as he led the aliens through the carrier's corridors. "She's one of our newer vessels, commissioned just 5 years ago." Vexhai was amazed by the size of the ship. It was larger than most Zeridian military vessels and appeared to be designed specifically for projecting power across vast distances. Hundreds of human sailors moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. "How many people serve on this ship?" asked one of Vexhai's subordinates. "About 5,000 crew members," Morrison replied. "That includes pilots, maintenance teams, weapons specialists, and support staff. The Montana can operate independently for months if necessary." As they reached the flight deck, the aliens saw dozens of aircraft lined up in perfect rows. Fighters, bombers, and support aircraft filled the massive deck, while crews prepared them for launch. The level of organization and coordination was impressive. "These aircraft," Vexhai said, studying the sleek fighters, "they appear quite advanced. Standard equipment for our naval aviation units," Morrison explained. "Each carrier typically operates about 80 aircraft of various types. We have 11 carriers in active service with more under construction." 11 carriers, each carrying 80 aircraft and 5,000 crew members. Vexhai realized he was looking at a single component of Earth's military that was larger than many entire planetary defense forces. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks joined them on the observation deck as the exercise began. She was responsible for coordinating communications between the various national forces participating in the training. "This should be interesting," Brooks said, pointing toward the horizon where other ships were becoming visible. "We have vessels from the U.S., Japanese, Australian, British, and Canadian navies participating today." Vexhai watched as more than 60 ships took their positions across miles of ocean. Destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and support vessels moved in coordinated formations, while aircraft launched from multiple carriers. The scale of the operation was beyond anything he had imagined possible. "Lieutenant Brooks," he said carefully, "how often do your militaries conduct exercises of this size?" "Every few months," she replied. "Different regions, different combinations of allies. We try to maintain readiness for various scenarios." Major Kevin Ross arrived to brief the aliens on the ground forces portion of the exercise. Ross commanded a Marine unit that specialized in amphibious operations, and he had been selected to demonstrate human combined arms tactics. "The ground phase will involve about 15,000 soldiers from 4 different countries," Ross explained. "Marines will establish beachheads while Army units provide support." Air Force will handle close air support and logistics. As the exercise continued, Vex-High watched thousands of human soldiers coordinate complex operations across sea, land, and air. Their communication systems allowed perfect coordination between units separated by hundreds of miles. Their equipment functioned flawlessly despite the challenging conditions. Major Ross, Vex-High asked, "These soldiers appear very experienced. How long do humans typically serve in the military?" "Varies by country and service," Ross replied. "Most serve at least 4 years active duty, with additional time in reserves. Many make it a full career. I've been a Marine for 18 years, myself." The alien commander was beginning to understand that Earth's military forces were not just large, but also highly experienced. These humans had spent decades perfecting their military skills and developing advanced tactics. As the day progressed, Captain Morrison mentioned coordination with other military commands. "This exercise is managed by Pacific Command, but we're also coordinating with European Command and Central Command to avoid conflicts with their training schedules." "How many commands does your military have?" Vex-High asked. "The U.S. has 11 major commands covering different regions and functions," Morrison explained. "Other countries have their own command structures. NATO alone involves 29 nations with coordinated defense planning." The aliens learned that Earth's military organization was incredibly complex, with multiple layers of command covering different regions, functions, and international alliances. What they had initially assumed was a simple planetary defense force was actually a global network of interconnected military systems. Colonel Davis joined them for the evening briefing aboard the carrier. She had been monitoring the aliens' reactions throughout the day and could see their growing concern. "Commander Vex-High," she said, "I hope this exercise has been educational. Of course, this is just a small demonstration of routine training, operations." "Small demonstration?" Vex-High asked weakly. "Well, yes. We're only using forces from the Pacific region. If this were a real crisis, we'd coordinate with Atlantic forces, European allies, and other partners worldwide. The total mobilization would be much larger." That night, as Vex-High transmitted his daily report to the fleet in orbit, he struggled to find words that would adequately describe what he had witnessed. A single training exercise involving forces larger than most planetary armies. International coordination on a scale that suggested military cooperation between dozens of nations. Equipment and tactics that demonstrated decades of military development. His initial mission had been to assess whether Earth posed a threat to Zeridian expansion. Now he was beginning to wonder whether his empire was capable of threatening Earth. The month-long stay at Edwards Air Force Base was coming to an end, and Scout Commander Vex-High had requested one final meeting with Earth's military leadership. What he didn't know was that he was about to meet the real commanders for the first time, not the mid-level officers who had been handling his visit. Admiral Lisa Carter entered the briefing room at Edwards, accompanied by General Rick Stone and several other high-ranking officers. The aliens had been asking increasingly urgent questions about Earth's total military capabilities, and Carter had decided it was time to provide some honest answers. "Commander Vex-High," Carter said as she took her seat at the conference table, "Colonel Davis tells me you have questions about our overall military structure. I'm here to provide you with accurate information." Vex-High studied the human admiral carefully. Something about her bearing suggested she held more authority than the other officers he had met. His instincts told him this was someone who made important decisions rather than just following orders. "Admiral Carter, we have observed impressive military capabilities during our stay. However, we are still unclear about the total scope of Earth's defensive forces. Could you provide specific numbers?" Carter nodded. "Of course. Let me start with the United States, since that's where you've been staying. We currently maintain approximately 1.4 million active-duty military personnel across all services." The alien commander felt his blood pressure spike. 1.4 million soldiers in a single human nation. That was nearly 3 times the total military strength of the entire Zeridian Empire. 4 million active duty, he repeated slowly. "And how many nations exist on your world?" "Currently, there are 195 recognized sovereign nations," General Stone replied. "Most maintain their own military forces, though they vary greatly in size and capability. Vexhi's hands began to shake slightly. If just one human nation had 1.4 million soldiers, what was the total military strength of the entire planet? Admiral Carter continued her briefing. China maintains about 2.3 million active military personnel. Russia has approximately 1 million. India fields about 1.5 million. Even smaller nations like South Korea have over 600,000 active soldiers. The numbers were overwhelming. Vexhi realized he was looking at individual human nations that each possessed military forces larger than his entire empire's total population. These are just active duty numbers, Carter added. Most nations also maintain reserve forces and National Guard units. The United States has about 800,000 additional personnel in reserve status who can be called to active duty if needed. Colonel Davis brought up a holographic display showing a world map. Different colored areas indicated the military strength of various regions and alliances. NATO is our largest military alliance, she explained. It includes 30 member nations with combined active forces of about 3.5 million personnel. We also have defense agreements with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and many other nations. Vexhi stared at the display. The humans had created military alliances involving dozens of nations and millions of soldiers. The level of coordination required for such cooperation was beyond anything his empire had ever attempted. These alliances, he asked weakly, do they conduct joint operations? Regularly, Stone replied. NATO has been conducting coordinated military exercises for over 70 years. We also have bilateral and multilateral training exercises with non-NATO allies throughout the year. Major Ben Clark joined the briefing to provide more detailed information about military infrastructure. Earth maintains approximately 4,000 military installations worldwide, he said. These range from small outposts to major bases housing tens of thousands of personnel. 4,000 military installations. Vexhi's empire had fewer than 200 military facilities spread across 17 conquered worlds. The United States alone operates about 800 installations. Clark continued. We have bases on every continent and in every major ocean. Our allies maintain thousands of additional facilities. Captain Helen Turner entered with data about military production capabilities. Our defense industries produce equipment for dozens of nations, she said. The United States, Russia, China, and European nations manufacture everything from small arms to aircraft carriers. Last year, global military spending exceeded $2 trillion, Turner added. That's just for 1 year of operations, maintenance, and new equipment purchases. Vexhi could barely comprehend the numbers. $2 trillion in currency units spent on military forces in a single year. His empire's entire annual budget was a fraction of that amount. Admiral Carter decided to address the question she knew was troubling the alien commander. You're wondering about our total military strength, aren't you? Yes, Vexhi admitted. We need to understand the scope of Earth's defensive capabilities. Current estimates suggest Earth has approximately 65 million people in active military service worldwide, Carter said calmly. That includes all branches of service in all nations. Reserve forces add another 40 million trained personnel who can be mobilized if necessary. The alien commander's vision began to blur. 65 million active soldiers, 40 million reserves, over 100 million trained military personnel on a single planet. However, General Stone added, those numbers don't include paramilitary forces, police, units with military training, or civilian militia groups. Many nations have mandatory military service, which means hundreds of millions of additional civilians have basic military training. Colonel Davis brought up another display showing demographic information. Switzerland requires military service for all male citizens. Israel has mandatory service for both men and women. South Korea, Finland, and dozens of other nations have similar programs. When you factor in everyone who has received military training at some point in their lives, Carter said, you're looking at potentially 500 million people with some level of military experience. Vexhi felt faint. 500 million humans with military training. That was more than the total population of his empire. Of course, Carter continued. In a real crisis, we could mobilize much larger numbers. World War II saw the United States alone mobilize over 16 million personnel. The Soviet Union mobilized 34 million. Modern industrial capacity could support much larger forces if necessary. The alien commander realized he was not just looking at a large military force, but at an entire planet organized around the concept of warfare. These humans had spent centuries developing military technology, tactics, and industrial capacity on a scale that dwarfed anything his empire had encountered. Major Kevin Ross provided information about special forces and elite units. Most major nations maintain highly trained special operations forces, he said. The U.S. has about 70,000 special forces personnel. Russia has similar numbers. These units are trained for the most challenging military operations. Captain Morrison, who had been quiet during most of the briefing, finally spoke up. Commander Vexahai, I should mention that none of these numbers include our space-based military assets. Space-based assets? Vexahai asked. We've been tracking your fleet since you entered our solar system, Morrison explained. Earth has maintained military satellites and space stations for decades. We also have defensive installations on the Moon and Mars. The final revelation hit Vexahai like a physical blow. Not only did Earth have overwhelming military superiority on the planet's surface, but they also had space-based defenses that had been monitoring his fleet from the beginning. Admiral Carter stood up, indicating the briefing was over. Commander Vexahai, I hope this information helps you understand Earth's position. We're not looking for conflict, but we're prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. As the human officers filed out of the room, Vexahai sat alone, trying to process what he had learned. His empire had sent 6 ships to evaluate a primitive world for possible conquest. Instead, he had discovered a military power that could probably conquer his entire empire without significant effort. That night, he composed the most important message of his career, a transmission that would change the course of Zeridian expansion forever. Scout Commander Vexahai stood in the communications room of his flagship, staring at the message he had been trying to write for 3 hours. How could he explain to the Zeridian High Command that their invasion fleet had discovered not a primitive world ripe for conquest, but a military power that could destroy their entire empire? His hands shook as he activated the priority communication channel to the Zeridian homeworld. This message would travel faster than light across the galaxy, reaching the High Command in just a few days. The words he chose could determine the fate of both civilizations. On Earth's surface, Admiral Lisa Carter sat in her office at the Pentagon, reading the final reports from the alien delegation's visit. The month-long assessment had gone exactly as planned. The aliens now understood that Earth was not the helpless target they had expected to find. General Stone, she said into her communication device, our visitors are preparing to leave. I think we've made our point. At Edwards Air Force Base, Colonel Amy Davis was conducting the final briefing with the alien delegation. Scout Commander, Vexahai had requested one last meeting before returning to his fleet, and his nervous demeanor made it clear that Earth's revelations had deeply affected him. Commander, Davis said, before you depart, Admiral Carter wanted me to clarify one important point. Everything we've shown you represents our peacetime military structure. These are the forces we maintain during normal, non-threatening conditions. Vexahai felt his stomach drop. Peacetime structure? Yes. The numbers Admiral Carter provided yesterday, the 65 million active personnel and 40 million reserves, those are our standing forces during peaceful periods. In an actual war, those numbers would increase dramatically. Major Ben Clark joined the briefing with a historical document. During our last global conflict, Earth mobilized over 100 million soldiers within 4 years. That was using 1940s technology and industrial capacity. Our current capabilities are far more advanced. The alien commander realized that even Earth's overwhelming military strength was just the tip of the iceberg. These humans maintained enough military power to conquer his empire during peacetime, and they could expand those forces many times over if threatened. There's something else you should understand, Davis continued. Earth doesn't have a unified military command structure. No single leader can surrender on behalf of the entire planet. What do you mean? Vexahai asked. Each nation maintains independent military forces under its own government. Even if you somehow defeated one country's military, you would still face the armies of 194 other nations. There's no central authority that could order a planetary surrender. The implications were staggering. Even if the Ziridian Empire somehow managed to defeat one human military, they would immediately face dozens of others. Earth's political structure made conquest virtually impossible. Captain Jake Morrison entered the briefing room carrying a tablet displaying satellite images. "Commander Vexhai, I wanted to show you something before you leave." The images showed military installations around the world. Bases, naval facilities, airfields, and training centers appeared as dots of light across every continent and ocean. "These are just the installations we're willing to show you," Morrison explained. "Many of our most important military facilities remain classified. What you've seen during your visit represents only a small fraction of Earth's total military infrastructure." Vexhai stared at the images. Even the visible installations numbered in the thousands, far more than his empire's total military facilities, across 17 conquered worlds. "We've also been monitoring your fleet since you entered our solar system," Morrison added casually. "Our space-based sensors tracked your approach vector, analyzed your ship designs, and assessed your technological capabilities." The alien commander felt a chill run through his scales. Earth's military had been studying his forces from the beginning, while he had completely failed to understand their true strength. General Rick Stone arrived for the final meeting, accompanied by several other high-ranking officers. He carried a sealed document that contained Earth's official response to the Ziridian Empire's assessment mission. "Commander Vexhai," Stone said, "this document contains Earth's formal position regarding future relations with your empire. I think you'll find it reasonable." Vexhai opened the document and read its contents. Earth was proposing establishment of diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs. The tone was friendly but firm, making it clear that Earth expected to be treated as an equal partner, not a conquest target. "Your empire is welcome to establish peaceful relations with Earth," Stone explained. "However, any aggressive actions against our world or our allies will be met with the full force of our combined military capabilities." The alien commander understood the message perfectly. Earth was offering friendship, but also making it clear that they possessed the military strength to defend themselves against any threat. Admiral Carter appeared on a communication screen from the Pentagon. "Commander Vexhai, I hope your visit has been educational. Earth values peace, but we're prepared for any alternative." "Admiral," Vexhai said carefully, "may I ask why you revealed so much information about your military capabilities? Most worlds try to hide their true strength." Carter smiled. "Because we want to prevent unnecessary conflicts. It's better for everyone if potential aggressors understand the reality of the situation before making poor decisions." The alien commander nodded slowly. The humans had demonstrated their overwhelming military superiority not as a threat, but as a deterrent. They preferred to avoid war by making it clear that attacking Earth would be futile. As the alien delegation prepared to return to their shuttle, Colonel Davis handed Vexhai a final gift, a collection of books about human military history. "These might help your leaders understand how Earth developed such extensive military capabilities," she said. Vexhai accepted the books gratefully. His people would need to study human warfare concepts if they hoped to coexist peacefully with this remarkable species. The alien shuttle lifted off from Edwards Air Force Base as the sun set over the California desert. Vexhai watched the base disappear below him, knowing he was leaving behind a world that had completely changed his understanding of military power and galactic politics. Back aboard his flagship, Vexhai finally completed his message to the Ziridian High Command. The words came easily now that he understood the full scope of what he had discovered. "High Command, this is Scout Commander Vexhai reporting on assessment of Sol System 3rd Planet. Initial intelligence estimates were completely incorrect. Earth does not represent a conquest opportunity. Instead, we have encountered a military power far exceeding our own capabilities. Earth maintains over 100 million trained military personnel in peacetime, with capability to mobilize much larger forces if threatened. They possess advanced technology extensive industrial capacity, and global military infrastructure. Multiple independent nations means no single point of surrender exists. Recommend immediate establishment of diplomatic relations. Earth has indicated willingness for peaceful coexistence and trade. However, any aggressive action against this world would result in catastrophic losses for our empire. Suggest reclassification of Sol system as protected space. These humans should be approached as potential allies, not conquest targets. Their military capabilities suggest they could become valuable partners in galactic affairs, or dangerous enemies if threatened. Request immediate revision of expansion protocols. If Earth represents the standard for human worlds, our current military doctrine is inadequate for future encounters with this species. Vex High, Scout Commander, 1st Fleet. As his fleet began its journey home, Vex High reflected on the month he had spent among the humans. They had treated him with respect and hospitality while demonstrating that Earth was capable of defending itself against any threat. It was a lesson in diplomacy that his empire would need to learn quickly. On Earth, military leaders watched the alien fleet depart through their space-based sensors. The first contact had ended peacefully, establishing a precedent for future encounters with galactic civilizations. The humans returned to their daily routines, adding another potential threat to their ever-growing list of scenarios to monitor and prepare for. Earth's military remained ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring.